Well, good morning, everybody. I am going to start by reading. I looked around and said, what is the best definition of paradox that applies to what I'm being exposed to? And I found one which is perfect. A seemingly absurd or contradictory statement or proposition which, when investigated, may prove to be well-founded or true. So, the paradox is public administration is functional. Public administration is efficient. The relationship between government, citizens, and government and corporations is easy, fast, and smooth. That's the paradox. In order to explain the paradox, and by the way, we need to prove that this paradox can be true. I've done an exercise of, we've exposed this a couple times, I've done an exercise of what's called future casting, which is if you want to obviously make this happen, don't work with what exists today, and that's the issue of transformation. Companies have a hard time to transform. The public administration has an amazingly hard time to transform because it keeps using the old methodology, the same people, the same processes, and there is no transformation from inside. So we need to imagine, and it's not a wild imagination, what the world is going to be in, we picked 2022, not too far, not too close. It's a continuous process, not like 2022, everything will happen, things are happening step by step. And we started with imagining the world of Anna, who is a mother and a working wife, as I said, in 2022. And this is the story of Anna and obviously her family, but her phone. I've not done any exercise of future casting about the phone. I can assure that will be something very different in 2022. Will be a speaking device that probably will connect directly with actions that we have in mind. But anyway, let's keep the concept. The concept is the one we want to do. As you can see, Anna starts her journey on a subway, Metropolitana Milanese, obviously. And let's say she starts in, let's pick a station, Lotto, and she needs to go to Loreto. And she's on the subway, and she gets an alert message saying, you have an important message in your app, and the app is called Anna's app, let's put it this way. She goes there, and here is the alert from the hospital saying, you received, the test is fine, you're actually pregnant, and she's expecting her second child, and you can start here all the processes needed to manage your pregnancy and your birth. And so directly from the app, she can book her next tests. She can book her next doctor visit. And she can even start applying for the bonus that moms receive when they expect the babies. It's a new policy that is going to be, I'm sure that universal income will be a big deal in 2022. And so the state, the government communicates with her, tells her things about her life, her health, her payments, and she does all of that right there. Oops, here comes another piece of information. Your electronic identity card, which is obviously is not the future, is the present, is in the mail. You're gonna receive it tomorrow between 10 and 11. Make sure that someone is there to receive it. So another type of information from the government. Why this is important, because the electronic identity card is not just a piece of plastic identification, it's software. And with the middleware that we're actually working on today, that piece of software will allow Anna to do multiple things in terms of being recognized, paying, doing several other actions towards the government. And here it comes. She actually has a second baby, and finally she received another notification where she says, now you're cleared. Your waiting list for the child care is clear. You can now go and have your child starting next week in child care, so you can go start working again. And you can actually pay directly on the app. And imagine just many other things. This is the building of Palazzo Marino, which is the Milanese public administration. And the paradox is, do there all the things in that 15 minutes of subway transportation, rather than what in the past has been taking weeks and frustrating waits, and many other situations that obviously do not state that government is efficient. Eventually, you got it home, and here is the paradox, right? I've done very easily things that in the past have been taking multiple weeks. Why governments exist? Governments should exist to make the relationship between them and the citizens, and them, governments, and the corporations, an easy and smooth relationship. And this is something that we're not used to. We have learned as citizens, but this is not just Italy, by the way, this is governments in general. There is a big Italian piece on top of that that makes it a little bit more frustrating. But we have learned helplessness. We do not expect the relationship with the government, with the public administration in general, to work. It just is not into our daily life. And this is and obviously in order to get to the paradox, we need to shift a few paradigms, and we need to do a few things that, believe me, are possible. And by the way, what I've shown you is not just a dream. This is actually the first mock-up of the app that will go into production probably in the summer. We're going to be doing a few tests with a few administrations, with a subset of all the services I just mentioned. You can just, especially those of you who work in companies that are digitally transforming themselves, multiply that effort by 1,000. And at that point, you have the idea of what transforming government and services is. At the end of the day, sorry, this is in Italian, but I'm going to tell you, it's message, government and citizens communicate to each other. It's payments, it's transactions. I pay the government, I receive money from the government. It's documentation, it's certificates, it's archiving, it's filing. It's preference. I set my preference, I set my privacy preferences, I set my payment preferences. I govern my relationship with the public administration, and it's my profile. If you think about it, this is a very simple representation on what daily life between governments and citizens is about. And I'm talking about governments as a public administration machine, not necessarily talking about the government that states policies, manages defense, manages international relationship. This is the public administration that manages daily life with us. And let's not forget, the overall economic development of a country does rely incredibly in a high manner with the efficiency of the government itself. Italian corporations are not used to it. Italian citizens are not used to it. We are who we are. We are a G7 country the way we are, living in a very inefficient set of relationship between public administrations and us. Inefficient, a digitalized, and here I'm going to start using the word digital transformation more and more, a digitally transformed government will have a huge impact, positive impact, on economic development on its own. Going towards the future, and without even thinking in terms of artificial intelligence and all those buzzwords like blockchain, just thinking an efficient government with the software, with the applications that we have today is essential. And again, this is not a problem just of Italy, it's a problem of governments in general. There are very well-known names of governments like Estonia, Singapore. On its own, China is making amazing investments in transforming government. They're able to attract talents more than any other governments on its own. And this is going to be, in the future, a huge competitive advantage. So, future starts September 2016. That's when we started the work, and we're going to move forward. I've been making a long story short, I accepted the offer from the then Prime Minister. I'm already on the third wave coming up, and it's only 1.5 here, Matteo Renzi. And the main reason why I accepted is that because I did want to help my country in some sort, but also because I thought that he was a wave of change, was a possible paradigm shift. And I said, I think this is the right time because I see the right conditions in terms of wanting to change. My prediction was incredibly wrong, as I lost him after 3 months with the referendum, but still, we kept going. And I wouldn't say this is a black swan. Actually, in Italian situation, it's not a black swan. It's normality to lose the government after a few months. So when I started by myself, this is the first paradigm shift. In order to make things work, you need talent. You need human capital. That's the biggest one, the first one. You keep hearing that we don't have enough money to invest in digitally transformed. It is not true. The lack of money is not the first reason, is not the second, is not the third. It's probably in the second part of 5 to 10. It's human capital is the biggest one. And the only thing I asked Matteo was, fine, we need to create the conditions for which I can hire people that can help me do this with certain skills. I wrote my first article. It's a post on Medium, and I was, by the way, supported by an interview in La Repubblica with Mario Calabrese, which is, my first message is not what we are going to do, but is, this is the type of people I need to do certain things, building the operating system of the country. And pretty much, this was end of August, I received in literally a month, a couple thousand applications, which 150 were acceptable. And I started personally at the very beginning by myself, then with 2 or 3 more people that I hired, a process of interviewing, screening profiles. That's the first 3 months was 80% of our work. Most of the people that were hired, depending on their roles, were done a math test and a programming test, logic test. And we applied, I would say, criteria that are not necessarily the criteria applied by the public administration to hire people. This is the result. By the way, there are at least 2 people from Bocconi, 1 data scientist, second from the left. Elisabetta, which is in Bocconi alumni, is right in the middle next to me. The composition of those people, not one single person I personally had known before the interview. That's usually my practice, especially when you do something new. Don't bring along people because you still don't know what you need the people for, which is very unusual, by the way. People tend to bring all their friends and the loyal, especially politicians, entourage, which sometimes is understandable because you get into a jungle and you need to get protected yourself. 80% of them are computer scientists, data scientists, designers, 1 lawyer, 2 people that they do communications. By the way, since I'm Bocconi, I would define myself a very immature economist. That's what I studied. And we started working on that. By the way, this number of people took us about 4 months to get to, and now we have a team of about 29 people. In May 2017, the team issued the 3-year plan for digital transformation of the public administration. The 3-year plan, by the way, was required by law. Here is another paradigm that we need to shift. Italy is a country that is suffering of over-legislation, over-regulation, over pretty much anything that has to do with telling people what to do. I don't know how many tens of thousands of laws and regulations are in Italy. A country like the UK, and I don't want to obviously compare apples with oranges because the systems are apples and oranges, live with 3,000 laws. We have tens of thousands. We have more lawyers in Rome than in the whole country of France. I mean, that tells you, this is not just a joke, it tells you the way we work. And the fact that we have I keep saying in the government we need more data and computer scientists and less lawyers. And that's the future where we need to go because otherwise we don't change things. So 3-year plan for digital transformation, there was a law, the plan wasn't happening, and this plan pretty much has all the things that need to be done for the digital transformation is a set of directions. Is going to be updated once a year. That's not a big change. Plans cannot be static. Technology processes are dynamic. The next version is going to be in September. And for those that are a little bit more technical, the plan, the documentation is open source software like Read the Docs. We're using a forum to update, to get all the feedback from administrators, software developers, politicians. It's on GitHub. Has a developer's website for open source, which we announced, by the way, yesterday in terms of activity. With a designer's website. So there are things that really it doesn't look like a plan from the government. It's very effective. These are the things, projects, you go onto our website, it's live. This is the set of projects we're working on. So not only building the plan, but we have decided to really go head on with what we called enabling platforms. The enabling platforms are those horizontal platform, which, if you think about Anna, app, are absolutely needed, necessary conditions, absolutely not sufficient to make that app be a reality. It's a digital identity. It's this massive project. It's called Unified National Register. Again, a law was made in 2012. We came by pretty much the end of 2016, and only one. Sorry, for those who don't understand that, the register, which is the data of all the citizens, are in 8,000 municipalities. They don't talk to each other, they're not synchronized. Anytime that there is a change is a mess. Unified register will allow to multiple things happen because at the very same time, citizens know about this information, the municipality knows when I'm moving from one city to another, the health administration knows it, the welfare administration knows it, so it really is the technological enabler. There needs to be a lot of change management and processes, but the technological enabler is there. And we applied all the project management activities, new software, new improvement, all the things that pretty much are needed. So that's the national register, a single national register, all data of Italian citizens. On the left, you have the paper version from the 1800s, which, by the way, in some small, very small municipalities is still like that. The electronic identity card, the digital identity, the central payment node for digital payments. You probably read horror stories about citizens had to pay in cash 22 euros, 0.21 with no possibility to get any change back. So all are the kind of things that, and that's why I wrote relaunched, because they absolutely existed before. The electronic identity card was the one that was way more progressed. The other ones, they simply existed on paper, but not in a project and not in reality. So those are the things we'll be working on it. So another paradigm shift. It's a new way to collect, use, analyze, and share data. That's the most important thing. Government is the owner of the vastest amount of data about citizens and the relationship with the public administration. But all those data are in, and this is not Italy, these are governments in general, are in silos that don't talk to each other. And in order to make them talk to each other, they made a lot of laws, but there are no tools, no process changes to make that happen. So the things that we're building are, we actually build the data analytic frameworks, which we already have a law for that. We already have an Italian name, which is Digital Platform for National Data. The technology piece, which took us about a year and a half to make it, most of it in open source software with all the new big data tools available. The vastest, I would say the largest proportion of human capital that you saw before are data scientists in that direction. Now, the point is changing the habits, the rules, the regulations for making sure that all administrations, central, local, open their silos with APIs, and all the data are in one location with one ontology, one vocabulary, one way of managing the data, one way to interfacing the data. As I mentioned, if we don't, those are all technological enablers, but those technological enablers, without those, we're not going to do anything. We need political will, we need a new prime minister that wants to make all those happen. We need absolutely sheer force to make those things happen. But we're building the enablers. And the paradigm shift, a new way to develop, design, communicate, and collaborate. So from data to communication and collaborations. Here is another example, open source in the Italian law. Article 68, 69, public administration must release source code and software produced, including tax documentation, public repository under open license for free use for the public administration. It's pretty much one of the most advanced laws in terms of open source and data sharing that we have in Europe. Dated 2005. And pretty much very, very little has happened. Yeah, you have one website here called Open Data from the region of Trento, Open Data from the region of Sicily, Open Data from this, Open Data from that, but they're non-functional, they're not usable. And again, building the tools. Oh, this is the other way. Anything that the government does in terms of digital transformation, these are the rules of the documentations, completely unintelligible for any human being that has an average, that doesn't belong to the public administration. Pretty much all the things, it mentions 600 commas, regulations, paragraphs, and if you keep digging, at some point you find very inconclusive instructions on how to use the documentations, technical documentations. So my point is, if we define laws and regulations good intentions, those laws and regulations don't work unless you build the mechanisms, the tools to make them work. And that's exactly what we're doing, which is a complete shift. Has not been done ever in the Italian public administration or in many other public administrations, although we did get ourselves inspired from the UK Digital Service Agency, from the US Digital Service Agencies. Australia has done a great job. I'm mentioning countries of our proportion, of our size. Then you got Singapore, you have Estonia, but those are smaller entities, relatively easier to manage, although they've done an incredible job. We launched Developers Italia, and again, if you can tell administrations, all your software needs to be open, all your documentation needs to be shared, all your data needs to be shared, but there is no human capital that understands what that means. There is no talent that knows how to do it. There are no tools to make it happen. So this is the shift, the paradigm that we're shifting and building those tools. So Developers Italia has pretty much now already like 15 applications for the public administrations that are right there for developers to use, for administrators to understand, middleware available, API available, to really build the famous app of Anna. Same thing for designers, collaborative, much more effective and much less expensive design process. Specifically now we're working on improving the digital interface, the user interface for digital payment, for the digital identity. So we're working on some flagship services. Obviously, there are thousands of public administration services. And that's going to be the hard part, how those administrators incorporate that part. Same thing for the documentation. We actually had to hire tech writers. So we have a platform and a team of tech writers to provide in one place documentation, technology, explained, so that, again, you are enabling more and more the public administration to transform themselves. I do insist on the tools. And I apologize if I'm getting a little bit in details here, but it's so important to understand the work that's been done in the past 18 months to build all of this. And again, all of that built in, most of it in open source software, spending a few thousand euros versus the hundreds of thousands of millions. This is a fun anecdote. The UK Digital Service in 2010 was built by moving funding from shutting down 3 websites that costed £600,000 and nobody was using, and transferring the maintenance cost of those websites to the UK Digital Service. Again, this is not just, as I said, this is not just an Italian point. But the way that the government spends is pathetic. We started open consultations, still with the platform. We speak with citizens, civil servants, technology vendors. So we're really getting that paradigm being shifted. So here are the next few minutes on major challenges. Lack of technological skills inside public administration. I'm going to go fast through those because then you have a Q&A session. We can talk more in depth about it. Lack of processes and tools. The situation is desperate. Is absolutely desperate. Whoever is going to run this country politically, you start with an idea, You vote the idea, it becomes a law, becomes a policy. And then, let's say the value is 100. By the time it goes through all of that, it gets diluted to the point that the value is 10. The culture. That this is an Italian specificity. Since we're a country that regulates, we need to, from centuries, right, Napoleonic approach, you need to tell all the layers what to do exactly. We got to the point that there are technological features included in primary laws. We're working on the National Register, has the definition of the number of fields of the database in the primary law. If that number was wrong, which by the way was wrong, you need to change the law. It's all about compliance. We have a central digital agency, I'm going to be very non-politically correct here, which is, it's a compliance agency. It doesn't help the transformation. Procurement. This is the biggest issue of all governments, the relationship between public administration and the private world to procure technology. The legacy systems. I mentioned Singapore, I mentioned Estonia, incredibly powerful, digitally powerful countries. Estonia, there was no legacy. Soviet Union had wiped out everything. The legacy for all, I mean, the city of Milano has still 50% of their lines of codes written in COBOL. For those who, some of you are too young to know what COBOL is. Future. This is what politically needs to be done. Whomever is going to be the next prime minister, we need to ensure that digital transformation remains a core component in government's agenda. And when I mean core component, I mean embodied in what has to be done. It cannot be a separate IT department. That's the biggest mistake that large corporations make. Digital transformation, it's IT stuff. It's not. Develop tech skills inside public administration with a top-down approach. Change procurement process. Foster openness, user-driven approaches, efficiency, and the digital integration of the public sector. These are buzzwords if we don't build the tools that I just mentioned. You can transform good intentions through mechanisms and make it work. Incentivate digital rather than analogic. There is a professor here in Bocconi, Carnevale Maffei, who says it right. The administrations that are still analog need to be taxed. Dear local administration, you're still analog, you're not going to get any money from the central government anymore. And this should happen very, very soon. Then there is also the benefit of digital. The municipality of Gallarate, for example, if you pay digitally with the Pago PA, the tool that we mentioned before, the garbage tax, the Tari, you have a €5 discount on the tax. You're going to run fast. But again, those are policies. Without the tools and the mechanisms that we built, those policies are going to be totally useless. Now, I have a ton of anecdotes, but we're going to manage the anecdotes during the Q&A session. It's going to be fun. Thank you.